Hello. In this chapter, we're going to be talking about AWS, and specifically, we're going to be talking about VPCs and understanding them and creating them. So, what is a VPC? VPC is, a virtual private cloud in AWS or any of the other cloud providers, where it is the place where all your virtual networks are connected. In short, it's where your underlying network is, like where all your resources are going to be located, such as your NICs, your ENIs, your endpoints, anything that has to do with IP addresses are going to be located within a VPC. Now, what we're going to do is, in the next video, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the kind of like the understanding of how a VPC works. Now, this is normally what a VPC kind of overlay looks like, but sometimes it's a bit confusing. So I'm gonna change the view of this and make it look like a city, which we'll talk about in a bit. After this, we're gonna create it from scratch using these settings that are set up here. Now, one of the things about creating a VPC is that sometimes it's hard to understand how to create it because most of the time people when they create it they just do a wizard or they automatically create it by some kind of CloudFormation script or Terraform, etc., where they don't really understand how it's created. So what we're also going to show you in one of the videos is we're going to go in and create it literally from scratch every single step. And we're going to set up the VPC itself, the subnet, the internet gateway for internet to have access to the resources within the subnet, the public subnet. And we're going to do a live demo on launching an instance and accessing the instance and making sure that, hey, we're actually able to have access to it from the internet. So let's begin. So what we're going to do here is we're going to talk about the cloud architecture as far as like what is a VPC, what are subnets, etc. But before even talking about that, we're going to kind of give a generic overview how a cloud architecture is, but we're going to talk about it in a city form where the architecture is going to be based on a city. So, like in this case, the city of VPCs are a city right here. And we have two bridges. One is a public bridge called a gateway bridge, and the other one is a private one called a NAT bridge. Now, when visitors come to visit the town, when they use the gateway bridge, they'll contact the person called DNS and says, "Hey, I'm looking for this address." For example, like, "Hey, I need to know where Mr. Z lives." And when the person comes to the gateway bridge, will ask DNS, "Hey, where's Mr. Z?" And DNS will say, "Hey, Mr. Z is located at address 5." So that person that's visiting town knows, hey, Mr. Z lives at 5, so they'll go to .05 because that's their house, for example, in block A. And then, for example, say someone out of town comes visits, they go through the gateway bridge and then they hit DNS and says, "Hey, DNS, I'm looking for the hospital. Where's the hospital located?" And DNS will say, "Hey, I know where the hospital is. It's located at 27 address." And they say, "Okay, no problem." So go to the 27 address. So right now what we're talking about is like, hey, anything that's located in block A is publicly available. So if we're looking at right here at 5, 7, 8, was 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, 15. These are all publicly available to anyone that comes to visit the city of VPC. And the DNS will help you find that place. Or like for example, say DNS is available and you're trying to visit the town and you're saying, "Hey, where is the police department?" DNS will say, "Hey, the police department is located on address 23." So when you come and visit the town, it'll point you over to 23. So this is how a public subnet works in a sense where anything that's publicly available will be available through the gateway bridge and DNS will help you locate it, and it's all located within block A, which is it's named after, for example, a subnet. Now you get an idea of how you can visit people and visit endpoints here. Like Mr. Z lives at 5, the hospital is located at 27, and the police department is located at 23. However, if you want to get to block B, let's say block B is very important things that normally public should not have access to, like for example a military base, a nuclear site, etc. Normally, this is not available through the gateway bridge. For example, if someone comes in out of town and says, "Hey DNS, where's this located?" DNS is not going to point to it because there is no address available for them. The only way to access anything located in Block B, like for example, the nuclear power plant is located at 100, for example, or the military base is located at 104. This DNS will not help you locate it, especially if you come through the gateway bridge. However, the people who live within the city of VPC do have access to this right here, but that's through a private channel that only they can access it through. So if you look at the blue lines right here, that is a private connection that they have towards Block B. So the only way to access the nuclear site or the military bases would be to actually go through the private channels, the private roads to connect to them. And since these are special cases or special sites, they have their own bridge to come in and out of the city. Obviously, we don't want to be publicly available because imagine you have a public available military base or nuclear site. That's really bad. Really, really bad. We don't want that to happen. So they have their own bridge here, the NAT bridge, which only allows traffic to come out and back in through its original form. So, for example, any military personnel or any nuclear workers, they need to go out of the city and back into the city. They'll use the same route as they're the only ones that are able to use it. And obviously, if there's workers that live in Block A that need to work in one of these bases, guess what? They have their own private road to get there. So that's how that works. So essentially, what a BBC architecture is this, in technology terms, we have a gateway bridge, and this gateway bridge basically connects to the internet. And when you're connected to the internet, we have I would say a little DNS person that helps you connect to outside the internet to find anything. And reverse too, if you want to connect to Mr. Z's house, I'm publicly available at point 0.5. I'm sorry, at address 0.5, so I'm publicly available. Same with the hospital and same with the police station. All these are publicly available to anyone. So if I type in MrZ.com, MrZ.com is going to point you to the gateway bridge and it will directly point over to right here, 0.05 address. And that's how this works, and this is all within a subnet or what they call a block subnet sometimes. Um, this is specifically called a public subnet, where all of these addresses have publicly available addresses. So that means all of these can be found on the internet. So if I type in, like I mentioned earlier, MrZ.com, MrZ.com, all the traffic will come here through the gateway bridge and then directly go to right here to my house, for example, or your houses. Or if you want to go to the hospital, like hospital.com, all the hospital.com traffic will go through the gateway bridge. Then it'll go to the connection right here, and then to the public subnet, and then reach 27 or 23 for the police station. However, you can never reach the private subnet, which is this right here, Block B. Block B doesn't have anything that's publicly available. It can only be accessed with the resources that's within the VPC and has specific um, network connections to it. For example, only these houses right here, the police station, the hospital, Mr. Z, and all these addresses are the only ones that can have access to the nuclear power plant and the military base. And then them themselves have a connection to go outbound to the internet, which is the net gateway bridge, which is only accessible to them. So this is what, in a nutshell, how a VPC architecture works, like how the network works, how a public subnet works, where anything in block A is publicly available and available to go outbound and inbound. However, private subnets, you cannot access it unless you're within the VPC itself or have a special connection, like a NAT bridge. So that's kind of how VPC is set up. At this point, we're going to create a VPC from scratch. We have options to create it from a wizard that does it for you, but I personally believe when you create it from scratch, you have a good idea when it comes to troubleshooting issues with a VPC, and it kind of gives you a better idea, like, oh, what do I need to check as far as deep diving into issues, like, oh, was there a change, was there anything updated, and it just kind of gives you a better idea how the architecture and how the infrastructure is, and it gives you an idea how some routes can be, and you can kind of troubleshoot a lot of issues with this. So right now what we're going to show you is how to create it from scratch, like all the components, and then at that point I'm going to see if we can launch an instance, and then we're going to play with it and see if the internet is working, or if any, see how the VPC setup went. So let's do that real quick. So the first thing to do is we're going to go to VPC, then we're going to go to launch VPC. Not here, but what you're going to do is go to your VPC, and on the top right, you're going to create VPC. Now remember, we're going to create the city. That's what we're doing here. We're not going to set up anything else. We're just going to create the city with all the routes already. So we're going to call this city. And with our city, we're going to allocate the IP addresses, which is, for example, the houses I mentioned earlier. How many houses you can create. So in this case, we're going to do 10.0.0.016. This is going to give us a lot of IP addresses, or a lot of houses, or a lot of destination IP addresses. We're just going to leave it like that. We're not going to go in depth because that's a whole different topic. After that, what we're going to do is just create it. Now that we created it, we have to create a block, like we mentioned earlier, where we have block A, which is public, and there's block B, which was private. So right now we're just going to create the public one, which is block A. That had, like, for example, Mrs. Z's house, the police station, and the hospital. Do you know where those IPs were? That's where we're going to create that whole block for. So right now we're going to go subnet. We're going to create subnet. And then you should automatically see the city one right here. Click on that. And remember how block A we were able to do like 1, 3, 5, 7, etc., etc. What we're going to do is we're going to select that range that belongs to block A and give it a name. So we're going to do block A. This is more of where the block is going to be located. It's not a big thing right now, so we don't have to worry about this. Just select whatever. Then we're going to select how many houses we can put in that block. So we're going to do 10.0.1.0-24, which will say about 251 IP addresses, or houses, or buildings, or whatever. Okay, we're going to create subnet. There we go. So we have 251 addresses we can apply to block A, which is great. So now that we created the block, the next thing we need to do is we have to make sure we create the bridge. Remember how we mentioned that we have Mrs. Z, then we had the hospital, then we had the police station. We had them set up where they can communicate with each other, but we have to make sure they have some kind of connection to the internet. So remember that bridge that we called gateway bridge? We have to create that and attach it to the block. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to go here on the left side, which is internet gateways. We're going to create one. And we're going to call this the gateway bridge. Okay. So this bridge is going to be created, but it doesn't know where it's going to be created at. So we're going to create the bridge right now. Okay. Once we do this, we're going to assign this bridge to the city. Right here, city. Boom. There we go. We attach the bridge to the city. However, you have to understand that even if you attach the bridge to the city, we still have to create a route to connect the bridge to the block, right? So let's go. Oh, excuse me, I coughed there. So now right now we're going to go to the route tables. And this is the route table for the city. Think of the route table being all the routes that are being made for the whole VPC city. So here we go. So what we're going to do here is that we're going to say, hey, for this route, we're going to make sure that, hey, that we attach the bridge to it. So we're going to do is go to route tables, locate the route that's with the city VPC, and add the bridge. So we're going to do add route. We're going to say the internet, which is 0.0.0, and then we're going to select the bridge. Internet gateway, here we go. Gateway bridge. We're going to save it. Okay, now we connected the internet gateway to the block A bridge. However, we have to make sure that it's actually set properly. So this is the last step. So we're going to go to subnets. We already clicked on block A. All we're going to do now is, let's see here. Oh, it's already set. There we go. Oh, sorry. I forgot about this part. It's already set up because I already selected the bridge. We're good to go here. So now what we're going to do is we're going to launch an EC2 instance. So let's go here, EC2. We're going to launch an instance. We're going to call this hospital. We're going to say Amazon Linux 2, which is fine. AMI is fine. We're going to choose a free tier. I think this one's fine. Allow SSH from the world, that's fine. We just put this on web server. Configure storage, that's fine. What we'll do is advanced. Let me see here. Oh, sorry. Network settings right here. So we're going to select the city. There we go, city. See how we see the block A? Perfect. Auto assign public IP address. Enable. This is to make sure, like, hey, it's publicly available to the internet. Security group. Let's see what the rules are. Okay, allow port 22. Okay, that's fine. Okay, let's launch it real quick. There we go. Now that's pending. Let's let it run by real quick. So here's the public IP address. Let's wait for it to finish up. Now you can see here, I already SSH into the machine. And we can see here that the IP address is 1357.247.10, which is what I SSH into. And you can see the private IP address is 10.0.1.11. Now, if we take a look at the IP address of the machine, we should see it being the same thing right now. See, if we take a look here, we see that the IP address is 10.0.1.111 as previously mentioned. So right now, this server was created on a brand new created VPC from scratch.